Felix and Randy, can you hear us?
Unmuted.
All right, I think we have Felix and Randy on. April 18th, it's 12:05 p.m. I think we're on the record at 2, but the intent is to be done sooner than that, if possible. We are here discussing AR 2025-91 and associated documents relative to the budget. There's a document that has kind of a series of proposed amendments by the members. So the main purpose of this meeting is to review the potential amendments and also have some preliminary information from the administration. Before we do that, we'll start with introductions. Start with Mr. Martinez.
George Martinez.
Mark Littlefield.
Karen Bronga,
Scott Meyer.
Zach Johnson.
Anna Brawley, Meg Zalatow.
Christopher Constant on the phone. We have Mr. Salt.
Randy Sultan off to depart at 1.
What was that? What was that?
I have to drop off at 1 p.m.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Thanks. Also have the presumptive members introduce themselves. They kind of looks like they have to share a mic though.
Yarrow Silvers,
Aaron Baldwin Day.
Jared Kirker. Keith McCormick.
All right, and with us we have Ona Browse, OMB, and the municipal manager, Becky Wynn Pearson, also our attorneys for Assembly Council in the back, some folks from OMB as well. The purpose of today's meeting, as I previously stated, is to kind of look at budget revisions, conversation about amendments. Yeah, but we had asked the OMB director to give us just a little bit of a kind of navigating conversation. So we'll go ahead and do that. Ms. Browse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me here today to go over the budget and also hear the amendments proposed by the body. I think that these work sessions are usually very helpful for us as the administration to understand what you're interested in seeing on Tuesday night and the changes that you would like to see happen within the budget. As I mentioned in some of the previous work sessions and the Budget and Finance Committee yesterday, the administration will be bringing forward an S version of the budget. So we will have another opportunity to include some additional changes that we have found necessary on the administration side, as well as the potential to include some of the member amendments that we see presented today. The intention would be to bring the S version, submit it to the body before the Tuesday night meeting so that you are able to review in advance and know what the action on Tuesday would be required. So the status of the budget as we left it included $480,000 under the cap, with additional fund balance in the marijuana tax and no fund balance available within the alcohol tax. moving funding around within any of those funds outside of the available funding would require cutting an item in order to add any additional amendments. And the items that you will see in the S version from the administration, just so that you're aware of those changes in advance, include two changes within AWU's budget. One is to change the title of a project. Another is to include a newly authorized capital project. There is a change within the SWS budget to increase one of the capital projects that's currently there. The Merrill Field gas system is going to cost a little bit more in order to complete, and SWS needs to start that work immediately based on the situation at the system. And the Anchorage Hydro will also see an amendment on its capital side that was part of the, I believe it's part of the owner's capital project. We'll also see a couple of small tweaks within the general government side from Treasury, and a couple of other department changes that are number revisions, but should not necessarily impact the $480,000 available under the cap for amendments. If there are any specific needs on amendments that we need to understand, please communicate them during this process. And if there are any questions on where we stand with the budget, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for the budget director? Nope. Okay. So I think that any other thoughts before we dive into the individual amendments? So traditionally what we would do is allow the mover of the amendment to describe their amendment. This is not an opportunity to debate. This is an opportunity to ask questions for clarity around what do you mean. But again, this is not the opportunity to say, I don't agree with this because of that, or I agree with this because of this. It's really about this is what it is, and you can ask clarifying questions. Do you really mean this or that? So that's the purpose of this amendment. I think the director just shared with us that there isn't enough money here for all of these things. Now, did you describe what your process is going to be from today to Tuesday? You did. I was kind of a little distracted, but if you did, then essentially they will take on the goal of setting up a substitute version, which will incorporate those items on this list at the levels that the administration concurs with or not, and do whatever their priorities are. And then we will have the ball back to us for our process on Tuesday to finalize the process and set the levies and get that job done. So with that, then we'll go ahead and start with the amendments. The first one is the needs-based relocation of individuals due to inhabitability. This is moved by, or will be moved by members Zalato and Johnson. You have the floor.
Thanks. So Mr. Johnson was nice enough to let me jump on this code project he's working on with development services. So we have a number of homes in our units in Anchorage that really aren't habitable, but the issue becomes if they are to be condemned, people have nowhere to go. And one of the barriers we're finding, it's really twofold barriers. It's hard to retrofit these old units that were built with new heat systems or plumbing systems. The new systems really just don't fit in the buildings. It's also chancy to put a lot of money into a building owned by someone who isn't already taking care of it. But the flip side is if we condemn them, people have nowhere to go. So Quincy, as we were looking at how other states handled this, found in Washington State, one of the recoverable costs is relocation costs. So first month and security, you kind of get over the hump of having to move really quickly. So that's this proposal. It was actually 50 to 100,000. There was this idea that it could move at a range. I think if this were to pass and be included, a concurrent code change to say that this is explicitly a recoverable fee in the code abatement process would be needed. And I think it's a tool to put in the toolbox and kind of experiment with for this year and see if it solves any issues, and if not. So it could be one time or ongoing. Again, this is quite a flexible amendment. The idea here is just to, as we're talking about all the ways to catalyze housing, The timing, I think, is good. If Mr. Campbell were to decide that some of these places need to be condemned, they could also be lots for future redevelopment. I don't know if Mr. Johnson has anything he'd like to add.
That
Thank you,
Mr.
sir.
Vaughn has arrived at approximately 12:13. So anything else? Is that it? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Chair. Can you go through that part again where it was the recoverability of the funding? Was there an additional element that we had to work on after this? Can you go into that a little more? Thank you.
Yes, right now code doesn't explicitly provide for the recoverability of like a first month or relocation cost. Whether or not it could just be recovered, I don't know, but the safest thing to do would be to, if this passes before perhaps it's implemented, is to go ahead and amend code to add that as a recoverable cost under code abatement remedies back to the owner of the home that isn't meeting the habitability standards.
Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, just briefly, I think I know the answer on the sheet, but so this, it says it's a specific fund. I understand that. It's still under the tax, or it's within the tax cap. Is that correct?
Correct. The form I provided said it was, and actually it should be tax cap capacity. It's a neutral item, right? It's an increase, but it's neutral fiscally because it's in the tax cap capacity, and whether it goes into the nuisance property abatement fund or to development services would probably be the best call of the administration of where they would like it to live so that it can be tracked accordingly.
Any other questions on amendment number D1? Okay, we'll move on now to proposed amendment D2 by Mr. Rivera, Ms. Brawley, Mr. Presver-Dia. And this one is Public Safety Advisory Commission Task Force. Who would wish to take this on? Ms. Brawley.
Thanks. I would actually ask Mr. Rivera to speak to it, but I'm happy to jump in as well.
Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to speak to this one. So as was alluded to when the Assembly passed the resolution regarding the task force, that there would be some additional support requested for facilitation, not unsimilar to the 2023 task forces. So originally, the thinking was that we would request $25,000. Claire Ross in Legislative Services reminded me and the team that those two task forces in 2023, the facilitators actually expended through the $25,000 and ended up doing a little bit of pro bono work. And so I don't think it should be normal for us to ask our contractors to do pro bono work. So the extra $5,000 to bring it up to $30,000 is to make sure that we're not in that same situation that we were in 2023. The attachment to this amendment details some of the outcomes and deliverables that we expect from the contractor. Thank you.
Ms. Alatal.
Thank you. I understand how the AR was laid out, but my question is around funding. Was there any conversation with the administration about their resources and how they support boards and commissions that could also help support this work instead of having to necessarily just contract it out? Thank you.
Thanks. So we did not have conversations with the administration on support. The conversations on support happened within the legislative branch. So there will be support from the clerk's office and from legislative services, as well as the assembly liaisons, to do a lot of the sort of logistical and other types of work. But no, we did not have a conversation with the administration on this one.
Can I ask? Okay, great. Is the intention here, once the task force is done, to have a recommendation as to not what the Public Safety Advisory Commission will be, or that there should be appointments to move forward to the Public Safety Advisory Commission? Or we don't know yet?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that third category. So the recommendations can take on, I think, a wide variety. But essentially, the goal of the task force is looking at reimagining what the Public Safety Advisory Commission could look like with the scope of how does the public engage in public safety in the municipality. So with that kind of scope, it may be that they develop a recommendation where the Peace Act gets recreated but looks like this, or it could be a completely different kind of recommendation. Hard for me to know from the outset.
Yes, Brian.
Yeah, and just in addition, I'll note, attached to this amendment, is really, a draft. It certainly can change, but this was, our attempt to lay out in detail, and thanks to Mr. Rivera for taking lead on this, what this looks like and what the facilitator would be doing. It outlines a process. It certainly doesn't outline what the outcome would be. And I think the part of the reason why it might be valuable to have a third party contractor in this instance is to, well, one, to allow all the folks who would be on that steering committee and involved in the process to participate, as opposed to just needing to be the facilitator. And also, I think to the extent that we're reaching out to the public, it's helpful sometimes to have a third party or to have an independent party. So they would be, of course, attached to this process, but it's not an assembly member, it's not a staff member, it's not the police department reaching out for that information. And so again, we want to make sure this is a transparent process, that we get input from the community, and this position will help us do that. And I think in addition to the two task forces Mr. Rivera mentioned, the site access working group, separate topic around zoning, it has been extremely valuable to have a facilitator to allow the subject experts and the community members and everybody to be speaking and really keeping track of that conversation. So that's the general idea. Thanks.
Ms. Braga?
I have not read through the project goals pages, but do we have a commitment that the people involved in this task force are local, that they are all from Anchorage, living in Anchorage, familiar with the Anchorage climate? As in, you know what I mean?
Right, so I can't speak for the proponents of the original task force ordinance, but I did ask that question on the record, and the answer was yes, the intent is for it to be local. And because my support of that was essentially conditioned on that, I didn't move an amendment, but I'm not interested personally in a third party coming in from out of state from my end. And so I hope that it's honored in the process. And if not, then that just gets figured out legislatively in the future. I don't know if the members have anything addition who moved it forward to add to that.
Yeah, thanks. So I will say, folks can turn off their mics. Thanks. So Jennifer Veneclausen in the Legislative Services Office has been compiling all of the folks that we would send the RFQ out. And I can tell you that all of those folks we are planning to send the RFQ out are all local individuals.
Thanks very much. And then one other question I had is, do you envision any capacity, since you're talking about who you're going, Jennifer was planning on sending out invites. Have you considered a youth member as part of this process? I know Rosalind Grady with NAACP is very interested in youth being part of the community violence intervention and having some say on how they feel in our community.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think we're talking slightly about two separate things. So first is the contractor who would be doing the facilitation, and yes, intent there is for those individuals who would be doing the facilitation to be local. And then second of the who would be invited to the task force, and so it's a public task force, right? It's going to be a mixture of who shows up and who gets invited. And certainly we haven't done too much imagining yet of the who gets invited part, but certainly if members have suggestions or ideas beyond what was put into the task force resolution, which does outline on the sort of the municipal side who gets invited, and just generally talks about community being invited, certainly would be willing to take those recommendations. And our intent is to get a first meeting of the task force sometime in May. So yeah, would be happy to take any recommendations of who should be invited to join the task force. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I had Aaron Walden Day wanted to speak with.
Yeah, thank you. I'm curious about item number 5 under contractor activities and deliverables. The small group meetings that are mentioned, are those meetings with the public? Are those internal to the municipality? Would love some clarification on what those look like.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I think, and this is maybe in response to Ms. Bronco's question and Ms. Baldwin Day's question, we have not gotten far enough as to create a work plan. So I think that could envision, it certainly could envision internal, it could be a focus group. Not everybody feels comfortable speaking in a giant room, right? And so, and to the point of who would serve on the steering committee, we outlined in that resolution, at least some of the seats, right? Making sure we have APD, making sure we have the mayor's office and community members. But part of the job of the facilitator will be to work with our group, not just the assembly sponsors, to map that out. And that's again, how the site access project worked, that we waited until they were on board in order to identify who was going to be invited to this work group and generally what the whole process would look like. So we've put together essentially a skeleton, what we anticipate this to happen, but that's not the same as a work plan and what will happen.
Mr. Martinez and Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I hope that you can help me with the point of clarification. You just, if you can help me remember, was there in the resolution that we passed recently that essentially authorized that this kind of look happened? Was there also a note of fiscal expectation? I don't recall. So I just don't remember.
So I think it would be fair to say that in the conversation, Mr. Rivera, the main proponent, said he would be coming forward with a budget request in the discussions on the item. So it wasn't necessarily reflected in the document per se, but for sure it was part of his presentation. Is that a fair statement for your words, Mr. Rivera?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chair.
Right. So that's where it came from.
So just to follow up on that, then, and we can go to the record. Mr. Rivera, was it communicated that essentially it was dependent on funding coming forward? Or it was communicated that we should have an expectation that there would be something coming forward? I just don't remember the linkage to the dependency or not.
No, there was no, and if folks can turn off their mics, please. Thanks. So there was no linkage between this must happen or, and if it did not happen, then the task force would not move forward. If that's what you're trying to get to, Member Martinez, no, that was not communicated, but certainly both in the Budget and Finance Committee and then at the regular assembly meeting, I did communicate that this request would be coming up. So did that in multiple different venues. And historically, when the assembly does stand up task forces, which doesn't happen too often, but when we do, we try to make sure that we send them up with the necessary resources for them to be successful.
Thank you, Chair.
Any further discussion? Oh, Mr. Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think I have two questions. First being, if we approve this funding and then an RFQ goes out, would the ultimate award of the contract be contingent on assembly approval?
So that would be, go ahead, Mr. Ray, you can start.
Yeah, it's my understanding that because of the dollar amount, that it would not be contingent on assembly approval.
So it'd be the administration to decide which quote to go with?
No.
No, this would be dollars dedicated to the legislative branch. So the legislative branch would decide.
So and I can offer, just separate from this specific item, there have been a small number of items that have been appropriated that have made it through the entire process from proposal to award that the chair even never saw until the very last step. Please sign this. And I don't think that that's good government. And so I think that it would be reasonable to apply a requirement that these small things either come to the assembly or at least to the chair. And that can be done in the amendment process as we get to the question. And so it could go either way. The standard Title VII procurement rules are pretty expansive when you get to these smaller numbers.
Yeah, I guess my feelings on this, you know, I would like to know who ultimately decides, assuming we get multiple quotes, which one to go with. And then I guess kind of with that too, I see that they should be submitted by Friday, May 2nd. Are we thinking that if this is approved as part of the Q1 budget process on April 22nd, now like the next day, we get this out there for notice? I'm just kind of wondering if we find ourselves, if there's another week or so delay between approval and the budget hypothetically, and when the request for quotes goes out, that we have such a narrow time frame that, you know, but for perhaps a vendor who's already contemplating bidding on this, we might not see anyone else step up. So I guess the question is, how quickly would this request go out the door if the funding's approved?
Yeah. So this is a different type of, if folks can turn off their mics. So this is a different type of procurement process. So I think folks are probably more used to either the ITB or the RFP process. This is an RFQ process, which is a process that isn't used all too often, but I would think it's safe to say that both branches of government use this process sometimes. And it is one where we internally put together a list of possible contractors and organizations to reach out to say, hey, we're looking for someone to deliver this type of service. And then depending on the bids that we get, I think we have to put out a minimum of, I think the requirement is at least 3. We have to reach out to 3 individuals. Then based off of the bids that we get from that, then we decide on who to choose. So it is not necessarily, it is dissimilar to the RFP and the ITB process, which are on the purchasing website. This is a different type of process.
Okay, thank you. That helps. And could you just clarify who the we is?
Yeah, so that is, I think, as I think the chair stated earlier, in the past, so I can only speak to the 2023 experience. In the past, that we has been the assembly approves the dollars, and then the we was basically whoever from the legislative services office and assembly members were sort of the heads of that project made the decision based off the bids. Speaking for myself, I don't know how the other members feel on this. I would be open having a slightly more collaborative process, whether that's communications with the chair in advance so that the chair is in the loop on the decisions, or bringing it to the assembly. I will say that latter, just being blunt, that latter part is a little bit, makes me a little cautious, because there is no other RFQ process specifically with this type of dollar amount that would need to go to the assembly. So if we were to make a special exemption for this, then I would want to know why we would want to make that kind of special exemption. But certainly I'm open to the idea of the chair having a critical role in the decision-making process.
Yeah, fine. I won't belabor this, but I will say for my part, it would be helpful for me in contemplating this amendment to have a better sense of who the decision makers are. I mean, that sounds like we is still a bit fuzzy. Is it the sponsors of this amendment? Is it the chair plus one or two others? I would just appreciate that information when we actually contemplate taking action on this.
Right, so I'm gonna, on behalf of the calendar, just say it's an open question. The assembly can do what the assembly wants. And I think it's the balance of the interest between the question at the table when we get there on Tuesday. And I think it's all reasonable. And so if we have time at the end of the session, we can come back to this item. We spent a lot of time on it, and there are members that have to leave in approximately 25 minutes. And so I'm gonna speed us along. Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Bear. Okay, the next one is amendment number D3. It's members Vaughn and Johnson, Anchorage Fire Department, $100,000 for funding for community awareness around wildfire. Who would like to speak?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Mr. Johnson.
First off, I'll state that we put down a range from 50,000 to 100,000 when we submitted our recommendation. And I think that's pretty flexible, right? So I think any amount would be helpful. Obviously, with more money, we can do more with it. And the impetus for this is we have been hearing repeatedly from the subject matter experts that we are perhaps going into the most dangerous year in Anchorage's recent history anyways when it comes to wildfire hazard. With a low snow load, even though there's a little bit left, it's disappearing fast, things will dry out quickly, and we might find ourselves in a very scary place. And we've done good work, I think, to make sure that we have more resources in terms of AFD and improving their capabilities to address it. But I think we're finding in conversations with the community that, in my opinion anyways, not enough folks are aware of the hazard or what they can do to try and address it. So there were sort of two goals that came out of this. And I'll say the suggestion was also somewhat informed by conversations we've had with some of the incoming members who I think are also very concerned about this and had ideas. One is to hopefully give AFD some resources so that they can hopefully do some promotional efforts to make sure that community members realize that the fire danger is severe, and then also hopefully let them know what tools are available. We have a FireWise program that's very helpful in terms of showing people what they can do to make their properties safer, but not a lot of people are aware of it, and very few take advantage of it. So I think that could be one leg of this. I also want to be clear that this is not intended to be any sort of district-specific projects, right? The wildfire hazard really is a citywide problem, and we talk about a lot in the context of the hillside. That's certainly not the only neighborhood that's threatened by a wildfire hazard. If you look at the maps ICER puts together, I think there's an area that is considered somewhere in the very high to extreme range for fire hazard in each of the districts across Anchorage. And so I think it's important that people in the community be aware of that. The other concept we encapsulated in here was around the idea of doing some sort of community engagement event to get folks out and hopefully in some sort of participatory role, do something to help do what they can to make Anchorage a little safer, right? Whether that means clearing deadfall in places or helping her out around fuel breaks. Don't have a lot of clarity on that. We floated this idea over to Anchorage Fire Department, and they've generally been supportive and recognize that more resources would help. But exactly how and what that activity look like, I think it'll take some more work to figure it out, and also will be somewhat contingent on what funding level we end up with. So I'll pause there and see if Member Volin wants to jump in.
That's fine.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great overview. And I will also just say that we share credit with incoming member McCormick. He helped us with this idea. So just want to say that. Thank you.
I would add separately and independently, speaking with Mr. Kirker, I also added for him to the chief and Mr. Glover the same concept. And so because there was an existing item, I didn't feel like it needed to be generated as a second competing version. But I would say that with myself in conversations with the new member from Eagle River, that this has broad support.
If I may, yeah, just since I certainly credit to Mr. McCormick, Mr. Gerker had some great ideas that were added to this. So that's how we kind of ended up with the two prongs. And I also want to say I had a good conversation with incoming member Silvers about this as well. So credit to all three of them for having a say and helping us craft this proposal.
And, yeah, okay, perfect. So Ms. Salto.
Yeah, I have a number of questions and they might be for the manager. Area general, it should be general fund, also covers Chuyak Eagle River. So this could happen. Yes. Okay. Saw a nod. Yes. I am curious if this would, how the administration views, is this an expansion or do you think this would be a separate effort? I saw and I've seen at community council AFD out there talking wildfire mitigation pretty substantially. So I guess I'm curious, do you guys think more is needed? I mean, I'm asking from that point of view versus the budget point of view, but I don't care who answers.
I mean, I can talk in terms of the operational perspective through the chair to Vice Chair Zalatel. I mean, you're right that there is already a significant effort underway that the wildfire team has been at community councils across the municipality, that there are a number of different types of print materials. They have a social media campaign ongoing. If you want to figure out how to firewise your house, it's all over social media. I think that it's clearly a significant area of concern, but I would have to talk a little bit more with the department about what they could or would do with this additional layer of funding. They do have a significant grant that is supporting a lot of this work. So they're relatively well resourced, but I can ask Director Browse to speak to the financial element.
That actually refines my question or my request, which is if we could get a sense of from that $50,000 to $100,000 range, how would this come alongside it? I hear the broad support. I just know that all of our amendments are well over what is here, and want to make sure we can tangibly articulate to the public if we add money, what we are adding.
And through the chair to Vice Chair Zalatel, I will check with the fire chief, and I was speaking with Member Boland about specifically to see if there is any overlap between the funding and project plan for the grant and what this would be able to do if it is supplemental, or how those interactions would occur so that we can make sure that that is appropriate.
Are there further questions? Go ahead, Mr. Riley.
Yeah, just to underscore, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the urban wildland interface and, the kind of communities that are right next to it. I just want to be, understand clear intent from the sponsors. This does say area wide. So would this be for the entire city, including folks who do not live or regularly interact with Eagle River, hillside areas that are immediately in that interface?
That's definitely the intent. I mean, the fire hazard is perhaps more significant in some parts of town, but it exists everywhere. And again, I would refer back to the map ICER did, and I would, if members haven't, take a look at it and find the neighborhoods in your district that are, under the higher extreme danger, because they are everywhere. So I would not limit it to East Anchorage or South Anchorage or one specific place.
Thanks.
And I think there's a little bit of an aha that the language may be amended in some way to reflect that, specifically the urban wildland interface. Yeah. So, okay, very good. Any more on this item? Also, for the record, I would note that Mika Bell, one of our youth members, has joined us at the table. Party's here. Okay, we'll move to the next one. The next one is a member Boland, public transportation, $250,000 for transportation regarding the closure of the cars at Safeway in Fairview. Mr. Boland.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so as folks have no doubt had the opportunity to see, Cars is going to be closing their Fairview location. It's in a neighborhood where there are many folks who don't own cars and who walk to the grocery store or roll to the grocery store on their bike or their wheelchair. And a lot of there's a grocery store component, right? And the food security aspect. There's also the pharmacy that the community will be losing. Many of the prescriptions that the Anchorage Neighborhood Health Clinic writes are filled at the Fairview cars. And so really what I want here is just a way for folks to get to another location for a pharmacy, to access their life-saving medications. And so I think a direct route that would go from what will be the former Fairview cars going to the Midtown cars and Fred Meyer location. There's also a Walgreens store there, so they could get their prescriptions filled. They could get their groceries. I'm anticipating that this will be limited in scope. I'm thinking like a weekend Saturday shuttle. that folks can have the opportunity to take specifically for this purpose. And I will say on the implementation side, right now, Director Rudolph is out of town. He's in, I think, Japan. And so I'm working with the mayor's office, with Mr. Downey, to see what implementation would look like. There are some challenges to doing it through the people mover system, but I think there's other opportunities that this funding, the other ways that this funding could be used to support the community. Yep, I guess I'll just leave it there.
Ms. Alto.
Thanks. So I know every time we've tried to do a new transportation route in 1Q, it's never materialized. So I'm going to throw out some ideas for you to continue to explore. Is there any role anchor rides can play, at least for those who are eligible for anchor rides, like going to neighborhood health, to the pharmacy, and then home perhaps? And my suspicion is yes, for a small number of people, that might be true.
Ms. Wynn Pearson.
Or do you have more questions?
I
You
have
can
a few
finish.
more ideas.
Okay, excellent. I have, because there have been, I should say that there has been some comprehensive brainstorming going on, which I think has made it to you. I'm not sure if it has all made to you, in the public transit department about this idea. And there are a number of different challenges. There's FTA funding, challenges to creating an actual shuttle bus route. There's time challenges to rerouting the routes. They looked at anchor rides. There's capacity challenges for anchor rides. Their recommendation, which clearly is subject to further workshopping, would be to do something like what we do with the shuttle at the Chugiak Eagle River Senior Center, where we pay for a certain amount of specific shuttle rides per day. The other option is something like the grant that we give to Glacier Valley Transit that provides, so providing support for a third-party operator who would be able to do the shuttle service for the things they thought were probably most likely to be able to doable, but we'll continue to workshop.
Yeah, so mine were all, can we do a private contract with a private transportation company? We use Sala already with ASP, or some kind of cab voucher process where we could work with neighborhood health, like grant neighborhood health some cab vouchers or money for cab vouchers so people could be able to access their prescriptions, if that is the primary, right? If the impetus is getting your prescriptions and there isn't a delivery option, then how do we, make that connection? And it might need to be a yes and proposition in the end. Some things will work for some folks and some things will work for others.
And I would offer just that there are a number of potential partners in that conversation: NeighborWorks, Access Alaska, a number of operators within the neighborhood who, and I do love this conversation about cabs, because the cab system has been underutilized in the face of Uber and Lyft and all of that. So there might actually be a negotiating opportunity, in particular relating to fees that we allow and charge in their whole transportation commission stuff. So there are lots of interesting areas. Ms. Salto, Ms.
So
Braga.
the thing I would hope to see potentially for Tuesday night is whatever pot of money makes the most sense in the most flexible way, so that there is an opportunity to work through some of these implementation challenges. I appreciate bringing this forward and trying to solve an access problem. I think that's important, but just thinking in terms of where the limits are of how we can be flexible about it. Because again, I think given the timing, and it's certainly not your fault, Mr. Mullen, but with someone from public transit gone and just it's a fast evolving situation, it will just buy us, literally buy us some time. Thanks.
Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, just because I'm also looking, I guess this is to the sponsor and the administration. And I understand there's a lot of ideas out there. This does say ongoing. So I guess what is the intended kind of commitment that we are making to this particular neighborhood, given this circumstance? I know the grocery store going away is not temporary, right? But I think that's a question. And I'm looking at this amount thinking this is about half of what's under the cap currently. And so how do we prioritize? And then I like the idea of a contract or other kind of options. But again, I would wonder kind of what is the time frame for that? What is the time horizon really? And also if we are offering that, how many people are we anticipating to serve, especially if we're talking about cab vouchers? So I think there's just questions, not because this is in the category of like, we want to solve this problem. And also what is the city's role to solve this problem, for how long, for how many people? And what is the thought for this neighborhood versus other neighborhoods. Obviously, other neighborhood grocery stores aren't closing at this moment, but so these are the things that are coming to mind because whatever we do now, I think we're making a long-term commitment, and so we need to think through that.
I'll answer first and then maybe the administration wants to take it too. I think a lot of those questions, are difficult to answer in advance. I don't know how many people would utilize this, but I know it is certainly something that's being asked for by the community as essentially a harm reduction, a mitigating factor. How long and how far would this money go? I don't know. I think it actually should say one time. I will say that because this is not something I'm planning to carry over to another budget cycle. Ideally, what the community would like to see in that location is another grocery store. And I know that there are conversations happening right now with potential other folks who could fill that space. We also, member Constant and I have a project that we're working on to try to make sure that that location can continue to be used as a grocery store. So yeah, it is. I think it is unfortunate timing for this for a number of reasons, not only because Director Rudolph is out of town and it's 1Q, but also all of the efforts that are going on right now in that neighborhood to reconnect that neighborhood and to reimagine the transportation and the infrastructure there. And so this really does feel like a gut punch. It is one of the few sort of central downtown locations for folks to get groceries. So I'm anticipating, I'd like to have a weekend shuttle of some sort, utilizing the ideas that we've heard today and the ideas that I've been able to talk about with the administration. Could we do something for 6 months just on weekends that helps give people a longer timeline to figure out their situation and what they're going to do. And I think another sort of thing to consider is that there's I think a demographic that uses this grocery store that maybe doesn't have access to technology or couldn't do online ordering for different reasons. And so just want to make sure folks ultimately for a longer amount of time, folks from that community can get to the grocery store, get to the pharmacy. And maybe there's an opportunity in the future to figure out, okay, what's a more long-term solution? Can we reroute? Can we do reroute a bus route that makes that connection as part of a longer loop or something? But that takes a long time. Reroutes, and this is some of the information that the administration has shared with me, they can take many months to problem solve how that fits into the larger existing network.
All right, I think we don't have much more time on this item because the clock is ticking. We'll be back before us on Tuesday, possibly. So next we have, I'm sorry, Karen, you were in the queue and waiting and I bumped you. Last word.
Okay, sorry about that. I really love the idea of at least a weekend shuttle. And I think you answered my question with maybe not the best access to computers, but it would be really nice if there was a sign up away so we had an idea of how many people were interested in it and we had a number that would be ready on a Saturday. The other thing I want to say is the bigger concern to me, and I expressed this to the mayor, that this store will not be the last store this happens to if the theft continues. And I'm not saying it's anything that's wrong with the neighbors in that area. It's happening at all of our grocery stores and retail stores. And it's pretty frightening. And it's, I'm wondering which is the next one to fall. So I just want to keep that in mind.
So I think that kind of veers toward debate, and because I have some strong rebuttals that I would like to offer, but I'm not going to. And so, yeah, and they all surround the store and its business decisions over the last 5 years. I don't want to lay this on any of those conditions. The conditions why this happened were set years ago, and it's just shameful that it's happening in the way it's happening now. So to lay, anyhow, I don't want to do that. Moving on. Next we have, there's Rhonda.
Thank you for
yeah,
controlling yourself. No,
$100,000 of amendment for funding for area-wide general fund for police department used for increased safety in schools. Ms. Bobby, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. So this amendment stems from the resolution that we just passed, which is acknowledging that we do have an issue with community youth violence and that schools are underfunded for counseling, they're underfunded for school nurses, and it's only going to get worse if we continue to have the climate that we do in Juneau. I talked with head of security about the possibility of expanding, and there wasn't an appetite on the dais for us to expand the metal detector program. And the head of security said he really would like to see us help in some way to support violence interruption programs. And I know that if this money is appropriated to Anchorage Police Department, it will be up to them. They'll have an RFP out to figure out what kind of programming it is. But I wanted to get an idea of what it could be. And I spoke with Erica Taylor, who is in charge of the Juanita Strong project. And in 2017, her daughter was a victim of a gunshot. And the perpetrator was from a home with a single mom who was addicted to drugs, no support. The other male that was along was doing very well in school, no problems. But after that, the trauma from it and no counseling that followed, he is now in prison. And so she got this group going to bridge the gap between a trauma like this or someone who seems to be going down the wrong path. And they do peer groups, they go to rec centers, people apply, they can do addiction groups, one-to-one meeting with a mentor, they do life skills classes, and they have no funding at all. This group is right now working on a volunteer basis. So I'm sure there's other groups that do similar things, but I point this as something that is really needed in the community. And when I talked about it with NAACP, I found out that that there was a Rosalind Grady witnessed her brother with a gun, having a gunshot. I think he took his own life. And so she is very in support of this similar, let's find support, let's build up. Every dollar we put into kids in crisis before it gets to be something horrific is a dollar that is going to make our community just that much stronger. So that's what this is about.
Any questions? Ms. Martinez.
Thank you, Chair. What was the chief's perspective on this funding request?
He was, are you talking to me? Okay.
To the mover of the, yeah.
He was very much in support of it. We had talked about if we rolled this into the APD budget, would he be supportive of the metal detectors? Would he be supportive of some sort of extra security, or would he be supportive of these groups? And it was all three of them. He was very much, and he told me about a group that's working right now in Mountain View. It's inpatient, or I guess residential, but it's doing the same type thing, and APD is supporting that group as well. But it's for young people that have been in a violent situation and they're looking at, kind of a anger management type program, it sounded like. But yeah, he was very supportive.
Just to be clear, this does not authorize the purchase of magnetometers or increasing of those kind of capital expenditures, right?
No.
Right, okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you. Next then we have from Member Brawley, appropriation for the 50th anniversary of our municipality. Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. And this is something, both of the amendments I brought are essentially from November. I've been having conversations with the mayor's office, with OMB, with a number of other folks on just ideas with this. I've talked to Brendan at the innovation team, I-team. So in this number could change. So I contemplated changing this from, and you'll see there's a list of 3, but it's really one amendment, changing each of these numbers to 10,000 for a total of 30. And so the idea with this is not just one event, but really possibly a number of ways we could not only work within the municipality, partner with others. Just this morning, Mr. Rivera and I had a meeting with Alaska Municipal League. So this is separate, obviously separate organization. 2025 is their 75th anniversary. We were brainstorming things like having a special exhibit at the museum. And so there could be one bringing it back to Anchorage about the 50 years of the municipality. So there's a lot of ways that this funding could be used to support other community events. The innovation team could do some really cool things with technology. I've been talking with legislative services about ways to really get, the community's past and present maybe decals in the floor of the library, for example. I know Claire's been sharing information. So there's a lot of possibilities here. This amount would really be a placeholder for us to work collectively to figure that out. So I've heard some support from the mayor's office, no specific commitment yet. And 2025 is the year. So this is obviously one time. And so, and again, open to a variation of the amount, but the idea is that the mayor's office would participate, the assembly branch, including legislative services, and then the I team and other departments could also be involved through IGCs of this money. So this would just be a home for the funds, and they could be used in other ways as well.
Any questions, Ms. Bronga?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you had thought about asking Visit Anchorage at all. I don't like that. I mean, they are willing to work to promote Anchorage, and this seems like in their wheelhouse. And I just wondered, if there's a possibility of asking. They are recognizing that they are getting a bigger windfall of money, and they are considering some other projects to help Anchorage, including hiring, promotion. And so I was thinking that might be a thing to do.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say I have not had specific conversations with them, partly because I think I've been trying to get traction or some idea internally what this looks like. The anniversary is in September, so we have some time. It could be in the fall. But yes, I think there would be a lot of opportunity to involve all different parts of the municipality and the partners who work closely with the municipality. So I would see this as a community event, but because it's about the anniversary of our government, I think that's why it lives in that space, but certainly would love to see others participate.
Other questions? It's a good idea. Good luck. Although September might be a very interesting time to try to get them on the hook for some funding for a number of reasons. Okay, next then we have also from Member Raleigh, appropriation to OMB, $50,000 for funding for area-wide general fund to study the long-term fiscal trends. And I think simply summed it's the municipal muni fiscal future. Ms. Raleigh.
Yeah, thanks. And I do, to some degree, see these conversations connected, thinking that there is where we have been, where we are now, and then where we're going in the future. So these don't need to pass or fail together. This would be funding, which again would live within OMB as a home. We've also talked about there being some additional money there. So I think this number is flexible. The thought with this and why it's recurring is I think there's really three pieces to it. One is the analysis of where we are. So I've been talking with Mr. Clauda, for example, about working with the university perhaps to do a small set of analysis over time of our budget, how it's changed, and really analyzing pieces like that. So that's one piece that could happen. Another piece could be analyzing fiscal options, modeling out things, and I'll call back to Project Anchorage. There was a lot of kind of analysis of what the implications would be, what the options were. And so that could be in the future as we move through this process. But also, I think it's really important to bring the public into this conversation to find out what folks want. And then as we move toward maybe some options for change, what that looks like. And the reason it would be ongoing is I think we've had a lot of success with the alcohol tax education and communications funding to really remind voters what they approved already, what we're spending the money on, the impacts that it is having. And I think that we should be doing similar things with our budget overall, maybe not specific to one fund, but really saying, here's the bonds we passed and here's the result of that, and really building that into our budget. So that's the thought with it being ongoing, with some of this work happening over the next couple of years, but then going forward, I think there's other reasons why we would utilize this. So again, 50,000 is a flexible amount. And this is also something I brought back in November. Thanks.
Any questions? Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, since this would live at OMB and we happen to have the OMB director here coincidentally, I'm just curious, I mean, what your take is if this feels like it would provide some utility to your department. I certainly think the conversation has merit, but just kind of curious if you have any thoughts about what you would do with it if it was there.
Through the chair to member Johnson, it does provide utility for the department. And frankly, I agree with you. It is a very important conversation that the organization, the government, the community needs to have to know where we are going in particular. We can talk about where we have been a lot, but to know where we're going, we have to take the temperature of the entire community and understand the information together so that we know how we're actually going to make the plan for the fiscal future. And I think that that is a very big deal in terms of what we talk about in our office, but also at the Budget and Finance Committee. And what the work of this body is based on is how are we making the plan? And a budget is a plan. So making that conversation forefront is something that has not happened, I think, in a very long time.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
So I have a question then. Ms. Browse, this feels like a public engagement project. Is that something your office is interested in, or how would you see that actually working?
To the chair, we are interested in it, and we've recently added one of our staff members who would participate in this specifically in conjunction with the mayor's office and the assembly office to coordinate what that conversation looks like. You know, in the past, there have been anything from town halls of just pure education and conversation around what our budget and revenue situation looks like, to, you know, interactive surveys, to brown bag lunches, whatever the plan that can be developed. I think that there are lots of different layers that need to be put into effect in order to get the education out as broadly as we could.
Yeah, so in follow up to that then, you know, I would love to make sure if this does get approved, and I'll say this Tuesday, but that there is some care and attention paid to not having these funds become the vehicle for a campaign to support X or Y revenue, right? We just went through some of that and it just didn't seem to be kind of grounded in a workable situation. And so,
And to the chair, that we are actually limited in what we are able to use tax dollars for in terms of advocacy in a specific, direction. So the funds would be focused on education and community engagement.
okay. Yeah, there's probably.
Yeah, and also add, OMB is the department that provides support to the Budget Advisory Commission as well. So I have not approached the BAC specifically on that. I know they also have some turnover and their chair has just resigned. And so, and that staff member, Ms. Browse mentioned, is also working with BAC. So we've also discussed ways that they could be not just the only ones leading that conversation, but very directly involved, because that is squarely in their wheelhouse as well. So I think there's a lot of possibility.
Again, caveat being we have what, 75 or more boards and commissions, and each one of them would love $50,000 to noodle around with. And so it's good to have them involved, but let us be careful not to create this as a project of the Budget Advisory Commission, because suddenly there will be pressures we don't understand. Okay, anyone else? Okay, then we'll move on to the next amendment. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Related to your question, would it be appropriate for some of the information in the community engagement, or what comes out of community engagement from this particular amendment, to inform conversations about revenue sources and such?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would offer, I'm not the mover of the amendment. I think that broad conversation is very valuable, and it might be the point. I was like, what are the options? Where are we? How did we get here? Where can we go from here? Before there is project X, Y, or Z, and then all of a sudden we find someone intending to spend $50,000 toward that project, and then there's it gets a little squishy and probably illegal.
Yeah, I will definitely say this is not intended to drive one specific outcome or one decision. And I think the key question for the public that takes multiple steps to get to be able to answer it is, what are you willing to pay for? That's the question. And to get to there, we have to do a lot of work before then, including figure out what we're asking people. So yeah, this is an iterative process.
Excellent. Thank you.
Other questions on this item? Okay, then that brings us to the end of the first packet. We have a couple more. Next one is day labor support for homeless sheltered people, shelter and support housing, $85,000. Ms. Bronca.
Thank you. And I want to say that these were sent in very early, like maybe too early is why they didn't get included. So I have been working the entire year on trying to figure out some day labor, as Member Martinez likes to call it, daily dignity. And it is really dear to my heart. And I even traveled down to New Mexico to take a look at their program, Works, only to find that they were modeling their program after a program that Anchorage had under Berkowitz that failed, not because it was bad, but because it was a bad operator. And in that particular instance, we provided the van, we provided the supervision, we provided the house, the office space, the place to run out of. What I'm asking, which is much easier in my mind, is that we contract some of Parks' work through one of the existing day labor operations that are going on, including Labor Max and Reverb by Henning, and there's probably more. I had meetings with Tyler Andrews, Mike Braniff. I've talked with Local 71. Everyone starts out saying, well, why don't we just hire them? And the problem is it takes baby steps to get people who have been out of the workforce for a while. And we are going to, through giving opportunities when they are well enough, when they are having a day that they can work, some opportunities to be proud, be supervised, have the equipment given to them. Both Labor Max and Reverb have their own workman's comp, they have their own van, they have their own equipment, steel-toed shoes and gloves to do the job. What we would be giving is contract work through Parks and Rec. And I did not have Local 71 get back to me, but they decided that 3 seasonal caretakers would be their preference, the funding from that, rather than saying the funding from a Parks Caretaker 1, because that is a benefited position and the seasonal caretakers are not. So the 85,000 came from that amount of money that is unhired positions that we could pilot. Will this work? And our target audience, of course, would be people that are sheltered or newly housed that are needing a little support to get back to work.
So you just said from unfilled positions. So does that mean that there is some form of fund balance available to pay for this outside of what looks like is available under the cap?
To the chair, I think the vacancy funding would be what would be used, but whether or not seasonal employees or which seasonal positions would be taken in order to fund this, I can't speak to that specifically, but we can look to see. I think that is the mover's intention, but I think it would be a conversation with Parks and Rec to determine whether or not that actually does impact their operations in a negative way, or what the other funding source could be aside from taking funding from currently vacant positions that would need to be filled at some point.
Right, yeah, so there was that assertion that this would be unfilled positions. Maybe they're unfilled this year. Maybe there is a fund balance this year. The real question is, and I think you did answer it, is this going to change the bottom line number of the department as it's currently proposed? And if so, is there a source not general government unspent, unbudgeted tax cap? Because if that's the case, it does change the calculus on getting to yes.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, right, it becomes less of a competition for limited resources and more of a, oh, there might be funds available. So if we
Yeah.
could run that down,
Yep.
it'd be great.
Yeah, part of the review that we'll do will include whether or not the amendments could be covered by other revenue sources outside of just general government tax cap capacity, and not just for this one, but for any of the others that may be applicable.
Right. And any further questions on this one, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, to the sponsors court. So the 85,000, is that primarily going towards paying the hourly wages for the people who'd be doing it? And then how much would sort of be overhead for whoever's administering it?
That would all be hourly wages. These two, I don't know about, there's probably others, and I don't want to say that we have to hire one or the other, but, they're looking for hourly wages so they could have more jobs, so they could include more people in their program. And, they already have their own salaries taken care of, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think there are some tricks to that because I don't think it's actually just hourly wages. Otherwise, they would be staff or temporary positions. And so I think what is spoken to here are contracts. I thought.
I was saying that this 85,000 will just be going to pay, 25, 30, 40 people who do a day labor job.
Right.
It won't be going to Labor Max's van or anything like that.
No, but it's going as a contract to a third party to provide services to the municipality, right? Not to the Parks and Rec Department to have temporary employees to do this work. Therefore, there is inevitably some form of management costs and indirect costs and other associated costs with the delivery of a unit of service to the municipality. And so I don't think you can say it's all going to hourly labor. That's generally speaking what's appropriated here, with the caveat that any contract has to be managed. And so if it's a contract, if it's a staff person or a series of staff people doing this work, then, but the word contractor signals something else.
And through the chair to the body, I think Member Bronga has identified some of these issues, but there are some operational challenges that we would need to overcome if this were to be a funded line item. One of which is that we would have to meet and confer with L71 because this is within their job duties. And so contracting out that work would need to be a discussion with them and approval. We would also need to go through whatever our Title VII procurement process is, either via a sole source waiver or an RFP that would bring all proposers of this service forward to identify the best or lowest cost provider. And then the operational integration of what that labor contract would look like with our paid work unit and how that would integrate with Parks and Rec. We'd have to talk that through with them as well.
And I did, Labor 71 was going to get with somebody, and I haven't heard back. It's been a couple of weeks, so maybe time for another call.
Right, and I will note that I've been around long enough that I remember the last vendor who attempted to do these services for the municipality, and it definitely was a goat rope. So, Ms. Alden Day.
I'm curious why there's a stipulation that the day labor opportunity is only for shelter and supported housing residents. I can imagine or envision a world in which folks who are entirely unsheltered might also be interested, and I'm curious as to why they're excluded.
It wasn't my intent to exclude anyone who is looking for work, but I think, it looks to me this position is like a YEP crew. You've got a supervisor with you doing the job. And I would think a lot of people who manage their own housing aren't going to want that kind of work, that you've got a supervisor that's walking the woods with you saying, pick up this, pick up that. I don't know. This is more, I don't know, very entry level jobs. And it wouldn't have to just be shelter, but I see, I definitely don't want the kind of position that they have to come to work every day. That's what I see as one of the biggest barriers for the people who are at shelters or newly housed, is that not every day, but that might be other people too that have busy lives and they can't work every day.
All right, so go ahead.
No, just to clarify, I was referring to the exclusion of folks who are entirely unsheltered.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you said that. So Amber is going to Davis Park almost every day. She finds it really difficult taking someone from the tents. She takes them somewhere and gets them cleaned up. And helps them change clothes, get things on. I just felt if you can pick up from a shelter or a place, they're going to be much more ready to work than spending the time getting them ready to go. But she is willing to go to the camps, and so they would not be discluded from this.
All right, so then we'll move on to the last one in the stack. Last one in the stack today is Ms. Bronga, $300,000 in ongoing funding to ASD.
Thank you. Now, this one came about when I got to thinking about if swimming, diving, hockey goes away, as it's slated to be, those are user fees that come to the municipality. And if we could support those rentals, and that would make it so those sports could still go, we may actually be the winner in this. Winner in that we are providing youth this outlet, but also we'll still be renting the pool, we'll still be renting the rink. We won't be losing all of those wages. In the meantime, since I put this in, I've heard maybe from Becky's, someone that that we actually charge a higher rate to ASD for using those facilities than the general public. And so this is a very flexible, could we in some way cut down on those user fees so that we may be able to see those sports go forward? And whether it's making it a general public rate for ASD, or if it's just reducing it so they can still have use of those pools, and keep their sport going. So that is the intent behind this. And the 300,000 was just a reduction of what we're now the school district is now paying us for those facilities.
So before you go, I have information on the assertion of the difference of fees. The difference of fees is not for ASD per se. It's for when you completely secure the facility. If no other user can use the facility, it costs as much as the whole facility. And so I have those rates here. I did follow that story down. And so, yeah, ultimately, there isn't a differential because it's ASD. There's a differential because ASD can't allow other members of the public in when a class is there doing, or the team is there, for kind of obvious reasons. But so yeah, there isn't an ASD penalty, just FYI. So
I
anyone on
appreciate that clarification.
Yeah, I would just second the same thing. And I would say I'm open to further discussion on this one because I've done some digging with the Parks and Rec team about how much revenue they think they're getting from these facilities. And so I want to talk about numbers too and figure out where the alignment is. And I think the challenge for this is we bump up against kind of if we were to artificially lower ASD rates, I think below what the general public would be charging, then I think we run into the concern about how much we're able to provide. That's essentially a subsidy to the school district, which is something that I think bumps up against how much budgetary funding we're overall allowed to allocate to the school district in a given year. And I would second what the chair said, the challenge in terms of they are billed the exclusive rate because they get exclusive use of the facility. And they also are a challenge for the Parks and Rec department because they use the same scheduling window every day as opposed to being stacked in some way. So it's anyway more to unpack with it, but I think there is some challenges to either eliminating their fees wholesale unless we were to eliminate fees across the board for the pool usage, or to decreasing them below their current level because of the type of use that the school district asks for.
Anna.
Yeah, I'll just, I guess my question is, since this one is very large, it's about, a little over 60% of the total remaining tax cap. The question would be, if we did this, what is a lower amount, or what would be an amount that's low enough that it would balance out with these other priorities, but also high enough that it would be meaningful? And I'm not asking so much for a dollar amount, but how flexible is it is maybe a question to the community manager.
I think that goes to the chair, member Brawley. I think that goes to my question for member Bronga about where the dollar value came from. And maybe you can offer clarity on the 300, because I asked Parks and Rec for how much revenue they're getting from their pool rentals specifically and from the rinks they control, which I acknowledge are not all municipal rinks. There's still the gap of the facilities controlled rinks. And it's a dollar value significantly less than $300,000. So I just wanted to, we probably have some more work to come on that.
This was an amount that was given to me from ASD, their management and budget person.
Watch out, you're gonna create an audit process. Huh, Zach?
Yeah, thanks. Curious about the dollar amount. I also say, I think it'd be helpful for us, perhaps for next Tuesday to know definitively whether or not this constitutes a legally permissible ASD to the school district. I expect this is the sort of thing that'll have some public interest. So I'd like to have a very simple, straightforward answer to whether or not this is the budget and the dollar values notwithstanding, whether or not it's just something we even can do.
Through the chair to Member Johnson, we can look into the legality of it and also the number and the origin of it, but what actually might be required considering the way the school district splits the year and the services therein, whether or not we would need a full year of funding in order to do it, or just the portion of, August to December, et cetera, et cetera. We can look into all of the different sort of options that could reduce the dollar amount and or make it ineligible.
Mr. Johnson, I was gonna kind of make a joke about, you just asked for a simple and clear answer. Haven't you been doing this for a few years? Rarely is it simple. My last concern about this one is it's picking two sports. And I know that there are soccer facilities and football facilities, and I know that there are biking facilities and ski facilities and any number of other facilities. And so some care and attention toward equity is probably an essential conversation to have when we think about these kind of subsidies, kind of asked on some previous items as well. Why would we, or are we intending to pick two sports as the winners? And probably it's because they're large budget items, and because they have a line in the budget, it's specific, but it certainly raises lots of questions. Ms. Ranga.
Those two are the winners for my ordinance because they're the two sports being cut in high school. The rest of the sports at this point in time have not been cut. Middle school's been cut. I actually would love to supplement middle school, talk about catching people when they really need the companionship of sport, but anyway.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I guess maybe I thought perhaps there was a different reason for this. Is there some distinction in terms of the ownership of these facilities we use for swimming and hockey, and that are they considered perhaps muni facilities and not school facilities? I thought I had heard that somewhere as it relates to this question about who we charge fees to and who we don't.
Through the chair to Member Johnson, these are municipal facilities, the pools, and I don't have all of the history of the pools, but I do understand we took them over at some point from the school district in part to help support the school district at the time. So we've been operating the pools and then we charge fee for use. The other facilities that I had understood at first blush to be on this list were the Mack Center hockey rink, which has the wrinkle of being controlled by the service area and Schuylkill River, and then potentially also the school district's use of the Boki and the Dempsey. But I was trying to figure out, because in preparation for this, I was trying to figure out exactly which buckets of money we were talking about receiving from the school district. All of those are municipal facilities. All of them are rented to the school district for use for sports, generally on the similar terms to what we rent to other users of those facilities.
So if we're talking about like track and field or football or soccer, those generally take place on ASD facilities as opposed to municipal facilities?
I believe that to be true, although I don't know exactly the ownership structure of all of the tracks at schools. We do have some track facilities that are owned by the municipality, but I don't know what the actual ownership is of the school fields.
There's the football field at the Boki area. I forget what they call that football field.
Oh, the Anchorage Football Stadium.
There's that.
Yeah.
Then there's Kincaid for skiing. There's any number of municipal facilities that are subject to rental and use by the school district. And so I just don't know the answer, but it's not simple.
Yeah. To your point earlier. Yeah. Thank you.
So, okay, Ms. Baldwin Day.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I understand that gymnastics was also on the high school sports chopping block, in addition to swim, dive, and hockey. Do gymnastics programs utilize MOA facilities?
I think then this area of inquiry is probably one that we'll spend some time outside of here figuring out, kind of do a survey and a kind of a 360-degree survey of the use of our various institutions and organizations. I think most of the gymnastics are actually housed in the gyms at the schools. I don't know of any public gym that I can think of. There's the Dome, and they do some activities there. There's running at the Dome, there's track at the Dome by the school district. And so probably the Dome and that Arctic Center is another one that's not Muni controlled. Neither of those are Muni controlled, but the cost factor is certainly a question. But yeah, we'll do some kind of analysis, and this Parks team probably has this in their wheelhouse and the school district. Okay, any other comments on any of this? So as has previously been described, the administration will sort through these amendments, see what they can figure out, see where their priorities are, and then likely a substitute version of the underlying document comes back before us that contains some or all or part of these. And then we will have whatever remains left before us on Tuesday as we sort through the final decisions on the first quarter budget revision, the final budget for 2025. So this probably.
Yeah, thanks. And I think we've already heard from the administration the intention to do an S version. I guess 2 questions to put out to folks. If there's any comments or additional amendments you're working on that you'd like to put on the record for consideration. And I know we already heard a couple from Ms. Bronga, but if there's anyone else out there. And then also, if you really would like to move an amendment, and not have it included in the S version, but have maybe some room saved, to be able to speak on the night of, I think that would be helpful to communicate here or speak to Ms. Browse so that it's not subsumed. And also to say, if you would like to say anything about an amendment, if it's in the S version, you can still speak to that item when we're debating the budget. So it's a matter of whether you would like to move it or have it incorporated.
I would offer though, if it is in the S version and with all the business we have and the certification that's essential, if it's in, you can talk about it, but you don't have to. It's not necessary.
Can we quote you on that?
Yes, and I'll even hold myself to that standard. And and one last caveat for members, you can bring an amendment until the item is adopted. So just know all of this process is to streamline and get everything thoroughly done and through the budget process to make sure it's doable and it's available and the money's there, et cetera. And you as a member have a right to make an amendment. And so that is the bottom line principle of our body. So with that, then we'll go ahead and stand in adjournment. We're back here at 2:10, so in 40 minutes. And we will talk to you soon. Thank you, everybody, for your work on this.